My wife hugged me and said, "You're the only one." Then her phone buzzed. Last night was perfect. His name lit the screen. I texted back from her phone, "Meet me at 8. Guess who showed up? When I arrived home that evening, nothing in the air suggested disaster. The apartment was dim, lit only by the yellow glow of a lamp we had picked out together on a lazy Saturday last spring. My bag slipped from my shoulder, and before I could even unlace my shoes, she was already in the hallway. Her arms wrapped around me with a suddenness that felt rehearsed. The warmth of her embrace should have soothed me after a long day, but something about it felt staged, almost too complete, as though she was trying to seal cracks that had not yet been pointed out. She buried her face against my chest, murmuring the kind of words that used to carry weight. They sounded hollow now, not because of what they meant in theory, but because of the way she delivered them. Carefully, deliberately, as if testing how they landed. It was affection delivered like a performance. I remember standing stiff for a moment, trying to shake off the feeling that I was watching her rather than simply being with her. Then came the sound that shifted everything. The short, almost cheerful buzz of her phone on the hallway table. She froze for less than a second, but I noticed. She pulled back from me, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes, before reaching for the device. She always unlocked it quickly, always too quickly, but this time I leaned forward just enough to catch a glimpse. A message illuminated the screen. It read with brutal simplicity, "Last night was perfect." And below it, a man's name. Not a cousin, not a colleague, not anyone I recognized as part of our circle. The sender had left no room for ambiguity. It was intimate, it was recent, and it was not me. I didn't snatch the phone, didn't raise my voice. My pulse surged, but outwardly I did nothing. She turned the screen away in one smooth motion, her laugh carrying the faint nervousness of someone trying to disguise panic. I muttered something about being tired, about needing to shower, and walked toward the bathroom. But the image of that message was burned into me, sharper than anything else in the room. In the bathroom, water drowned out the sounds of the apartment while my mind raced. I could storm out, confront her, demand answers. But what would she say? Denial, deflection, tears, anything to muddy the certainty of what I had just seen. She had already practiced those defenses, I could tell. No, I needed more than a confrontation. I needed the truth presented so clearly that she couldn't twist it. So I made a choice that felt colder than anything I had done before. I would answer the message myself. When I left the shower, she was already in the kitchen. I could smell onions sizzling in the pan. She was humming to herself, making a performance of domestic normality. The phone was still on the hallway table, glowing faintly with another notification. She hadn't even bothered to carry it with her. I walked past as if heading for the bedroom, but paused just long enough to take it in hand. The device unlocked with her usual pattern. The conversation thread was still open. My hands barely trembled as I typed. "Meet me at 8. No elaboration, no excuses. Just an instruction. A minute passed, then another. The reply came quickly. "Where?" "Same place as before." The words hit me harder than the original message. Same place as before. It wasn't just one night. This wasn't spontaneous. This was routine. I forced myself not to reply immediately. My instinct was to demand details, but I needed to appear casual, as though I were her. I typed a short confirmation. The man answered with enthusiasm. The meeting was set. I deleted the notifications, placed the phone back exactly where it had been, and walked into the bedroom. My face in the mirror looked unchanged, but my chest burned. She thought she was safe, thought her act was working. And for now, I would let her believe that. Dinner passed without incident. She moved around the kitchen, chatting about her day, recounting trivial events. I nodded, even asked questions, every part of me pretending to be the same husband I had been that morning. Beneath the table, I checked the clock. The minutes crawled forward. 8 o'clock was approaching, and she didn't seem to suspect anything. By the time I excused myself, saying I needed to run a quick errand, she only waved me off with a distracted smile. There was no suspicion in her eyes. She had no idea that the trap had already been sprung. The cafe where we agreed to meet was on the edge of the city center, a quiet place with outdoor seating under flickering street lamps. I arrived early, choosing a table with a clear view of the entrance. The night air was cold, and I could feel the pulse in my neck as I waited. For 10 minutes, no one appeared. Then, at exactly 8, a man stepped into the glow of the cafe lights. He looked ordinary, too ordinary. Dark jacket, neat hair, a slight nervousness in the way he scanned the tables. He was expecting her, not me. His eyes flicked over the crowd, searching for a familiar face. I stayed seated, letting him look around. The moment stretched. He pulled out his phone, probably sending a message, probably wondering why she hadn't arrived yet. I didn't move, not yet. Watching him was enough for now, enough to confirm that this wasn't some cruel misunderstanding. But then, As I observed him, another figure caught my attention. Across the street, leaning against a wall, someone else was waiting. Not looking at the cafe directly, but close enough to be connected. The posture, the way the person shifted from foot to foot, glancing occasionally toward the door, it was too deliberate to be coincidence. My stomach twisted. One man was bad enough, but this suggested more. She wasn't just tangled with one stranger. There were layers here I hadn't yet understood. The man inside the cafe typed quickly on his phone, then checked the door again. The figure across the street adjusted their stance, as if preparing for something. I realized then that this night was about to unravel far more than I had anticipated. And instead of fear, I felt a grim focus. The stage was set. The first act of betrayal had been revealed, but the play wasn't over. It was only beginning. The man inside the cafe kept glancing at the door, unaware of the storm waiting for him. His jacket looked new, bought for the kind of meetings that mattered, and his shoes carried the shine of someone who took the evening seriously. He believed this was another night in a secret arrangement, another routine moment with a woman who had promised him something. He didn't know that I was already seated, watching every flicker of uncertainty cross his face. The figure across the street unsettled me more than the man in front of me. The way he leaned against the wall suggested patience, but not idleness. He wasn't passing time. He was waiting for something specific. The longer I studied him, the clearer it became that he wasn't there by accident. He shifted his weight every few minutes, checking his phone, then looking toward the cafe. A sense of surveillance hung in the air. I decided to wait. Timing mattered. Bursting forward too soon would waste the opportunity. So I sat with a cup of untouched coffee, pretending to scroll through my own phone, while my mind sorted through possibilities. If the man across the street was also connected to her, then this web was thicker than I had feared. The man inside eventually pulled his phone from his pocket and began typing. My own device vibrated almost instantly. A message, written to her, but arriving in my hand. He wanted to know where she was, if she had changed her mind, if she was running late. His tone carried the eagerness of someone certain of intimacy. He didn't ask if she was coming. He assumed she was. I typed nothing in return. Instead, I let the silence build. I wanted him unsettled, uncertain, looking for answers that wouldn't come. Across the street, the watcher straightened, almost as if he expected movement. The synchronization between the two of them, though indirect, grew harder to dismiss. At that point, I made my move. I stood, walked calmly toward the man inside, and sat down across from him without introduction. His eyes lifted, confusion freezing his expression. He searched for recognition, but none arrived. His lips parted as though to speak, but no words followed. He had expected her, and instead he had me. The moment carried its own weight. He looked at me, then at his phone, then back again, trying to piece together why I was there. I didn't need to speak. My silence pressed down harder than words could have. He shifted uncomfortably, pulling at his sleeve, glancing toward the exit as if escape was an option. Finally, he stammered something about waiting for someone. It was weak, unconvincing, a cover that crumbled the moment it was offered. He knew. I knew. There was no use pretending. The air between us held the truth too tightly. He tried again, this time lowering his voice, saying he might have made a mistake. He avoided naming her, avoided direct acknowledgement, but his eyes betrayed him. He recognized me. Maybe she had mentioned me. Maybe he had seen photos. Whatever the case, he knew that I was not supposed to be here, and that meant he also knew exactly who I was. I leaned back, watching him fumble. Every movement, every pause in his sentences, confirmed that this wasn't a casual fling he could dismiss. He wasn't caught off guard by a misunderstanding. He was cornered by reality. Across the street, the figure adjusted again, pulling a cap lower over his face. My suspicion hardened. If the man sitting across from me was one layer of betrayal, then the one outside was another. And I was sitting in the middle of a structure I hadn't fully uncovered yet. The man in front of me finally admitted that he had been seeing her. He tried to soften it with excuses, claiming it wasn't serious, that it just happened, that lines had blurred. Each word only confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't a one-time error. It was a pattern, repeated, accepted, disguised under weak rationalizations. But then he made a mistake. He mentioned that she had canceled another meeting recently, saying she was afraid of getting caught. The detail slipped out too naturally to be invented. He hadn't meant to reveal that they had a history of scheduled encounters, but the truth was out. My jaw tightened. This wasn't spontaneous, wasn't impulsive. It was systematic. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from a different thread on her device. A new name appeared, with words far too intimate to be mistaken for anything else. The timing was merciless. I was sitting in front of one lover while another confirmed himself through her phone. The web expanded in real time, stretching beyond anything I had suspected when I first typed that reply. The man across from me leaned forward, noticing the way my attention shifted to the screen. He asked if she was coming. His ignorance in that moment was almost surreal. He didn't realize that he wasn't the only one. I stood, leaving him at the table without another word. My silence unnerved him more than confrontation would have. As I walked outside, the man across the street stiffened. His phone lit up in his hand, and I caught the glow of her name on his screen. He was waiting too, but for a different version of her. The realization was suffocating. She had built parallel arrangements, layered them so carefully that none of them had collided until now. And yet here they were, intersecting in the most public way possible. I lingered near the corner, watching the two men occupy the same space without realizing their connection. The first sat inside, restless and confused. The second lingered outside, cautious but tethered by his phone. They were both waiting for her, both unaware that she had already been exposed. The night closed in, cold and sharp. I didn't confront the second man. Not yet. Instead, I let the image burn itself into my mind. Two men bound by the same lie, waiting for a woman who had promised them both something exclusive. When I finally left, I didn't go home immediately. I walked through the city, the lights blurring past as my mind mapped out what I had uncovered. It wasn't just infidelity. It was structure. Routine meetings, parallel relationships, financial ties hidden in the details of her spending. And now, with two men standing at opposite ends of the same betrayal, the pattern was undeniable. By the time I reached the apartment, hours had passed. She was sitting on the couch, television glowing in front of her, pretending to be relaxed. She greeted me with casual words, the same tone she had used countless times before, as though the day had been ordinary. But I carried the cafe with me, the watchers, the messages, the undeniable cracks in her carefully constructed life. I didn't confront her then. Not directly. I sat down beside her, nodded, and let her believe that nothing had shifted. But beneath the surface, the momentum had already turned. The game was no longer about suspicion. It was about exposure. And soon, every piece she had hidden would come crashing into the light. The night after the cafe, the apartment felt like a stage set for a play where only I knew the script had changed. She moved through the rooms in her usual rhythm, phone in her hand, television humming in the background, glass of wine balanced carefully on the arm of the sofa. If she noticed anything strange in my silence, she didn't show it. Perhaps she had grown accustomed to the idea that I was predictable, steady, and unlikely to challenge her carefully balanced routine. I studied her with the same detachment I had used at the cafe. Every laugh she forced at a sitcom, every casual comment about her day, carried the weight of pretense. The thought struck me that her entire existence with me had become one long performance, sustained only because I had not yet interrupted it. When I finally spoke, it was not to confront her, but to drop fragments that would test her composure. I asked vague questions about her work schedule, about errands she had run earlier in the week, about minor expenses she had put on our joint account. Each answer arrived smoothly, too smoothly. She had rehearsed these stories, and the ease with which she delivered them betrayed the fact that she had been living in constant preparation for suspicion. I let her talk. Every detail she offered, every invented explanation, became another thread in the net she was unknowingly weaving around herself. I said little, nodded often, and watched her relax into the illusion that she had managed to keep the balance intact. But when she drifted off to bed, leaving her phone on the table, I retrieved it once more. This time, I didn't only scroll through the messages. I went deeper, into the banking apps we both used. The numbers told a story more damning than any text could. Small withdrawals over weeks had become larger transfers. A parallel account existed under her name alone, filled with carefully hidden deposits that had no connection to our salaries or shared expenses. The amounts matched the times when she had claimed to be shopping with friends or visiting family. The betrayal extended beyond her body and her words. She had been siphoning money, piece by piece, building a reservoir for a life outside of ours. The realization chilled me. Infidelity was personal, but theft from our shared future carried a sharper edge. It meant she had not only been unfaithful, but had actively planned for an exit. She hadn't been drifting accidentally into someone else's arms. She had been constructing an escape route while I carried the weight of stability for both of us. I slept little that night. The glow of the phone screen lingered in my mind long after I set it down. The following day, I met an old friend for coffee. He had always been close to both of us, someone who had attended our dinners, traveled with us once, and spoken warmly of her whenever I mentioned her name. I didn't intend to reveal much, but my silence during our conversation prompted him to ask if something was wrong. When I hesitated, he filled the silence with a confession of his own. Weeks earlier, he had seen her in the city, walking with a man he didn't recognize. At first, he thought little of it, but when he noticed their hands brushing together and the closeness of their body language, suspicion struck him. He had wanted to tell me, but convinced himself that it was a misunderstanding, that raising it would only damage things unnecessarily. His guilt poured out in half-finished sentences. He admitted he had seen her twice, always with the same man. Always at times she had told me she was elsewhere. He lowered his gaze when he finished speaking, unable to meet my eyes. The weight of his words didn't surprise me. They aligned too perfectly with what I had already uncovered. But they deepened the betrayal in another way. She had not only deceived me, but had placed me in a position where others pitted my ignorance. My friend had carried the knowledge quietly, allowing me to play the role of the loyal husband while the truth circulated behind my back. I left the cafe with the confirmation I hadn't asked for, but needed nonetheless. The circle of deception was wider than I had realized. Back home, I kept my calm facade intact. She greeted me with a smile, kissed me lightly, and asked about my day. I returned the gesture without hesitation. But inside, I felt the walls closing in around her. Every step she took, every word she spoke, brought her closer to the moment when the carefully balanced performance would collapse under its own weight. That evening, while she showered, I opened her laptop. The financial trail extended further than the phone app had revealed. Purchases made under false descriptions, hotel bookings disguised as work expenses, gifts sent to addresses that were not ours. Each piece of data stacked upon the last until the image became undeniable. She had been building another life with my money, with my time, with the trust one had given freely. The sound of water running in the bathroom gave me cover, but when it stopped, I closed the laptop and returned it to its place. She walked out wrapped in a towel, hair dripping, eyes soft with the kind of intimacy that once would have disarmed me. Now, it looked grotesque, an act delivered by someone who had already abandoned the stage in her mind. She curled beside me on the couch, speaking softly about a series she wanted to start, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on my arm. I nodded, keeping my breathing steady, letting her believe that nothing had shifted. But every touch felt like counterfeit currency, valuable only until exposed. Later that night, I stared at the ceiling in the darkness while she slept beside me. Her breathing was steady, calm, untroubled. Mine was not. I replayed the cafe, the watcher outside, the confession from my friend, the hidden accounts. Each memory layered upon the next, forming not just suspicion, but a structure of evidence so strong that even her most elaborate lies would crumble under its weight. I realized then that confrontation in private would never be enough. She was too skilled at denial, too prepared with half-truths and excuses. No, the reckoning had to be public, undeniable, and final. The plan formed slowly, piece by piece, as the hours passed. I would not shout, I would not beg. I would set the stage where she could not escape, where every thread of her deception would be pulled at once until the entire fabric unraveled. She would not only face me, she would face everyone she had deceived. By dawn, the path ahead was clear. The next part of this story would not unfold in whispered arguments or hidden discoveries. It would play out in the open, under the eyes of those who once believed in her. By the end of the week, my resolve had hardened into something unshakable. I had the evidence, the witnesses, the patterns of her lies. To confront her privately would have been to hand her the chance to twist the narrative, to cry and deflect, to paint me as paranoid or cruel. She thrived in secrecy, in carefully controlled spaces where she could manage appearances. The only way to break her was to remove the walls, to let the truth spill out where she had no control. I arranged a dinner. Invitations went to close friends and family, the people whose opinions she valued most, the ones she worked hardest to impress. I presented it as a casual gathering, a celebration of nothing in particular, just an evening together. She smiled when I told her, delighted at the idea of hosting, already thinking of what to wear, what dishes to prepare, which wine to open. She had no suspicion that she was preparing the stage for her own collapse. The night arrived cold and sharp. She dressed with care, moving through the house with a confidence that would have seemed beautiful months ago, but now struck me as grotesque. She believed she was about to charm everyone, to bask in the glow of admiration she had carefully cultivated. Guests began to arrive. My friend, the one who had confessed seeing her in the city, walked in with a stiffness in his posture. He avoided her gaze, offered polite greetings, but his discomfort hung heavy in the room. My parents arrived, followed by her colleagues, each carrying the easy smiles of people expecting a pleasant evening. She floated among them like a hostess in her element, laughing, pouring drinks, making conversation. And then, precisely as planned, the other pieces arrived. The first man from the cafe stepped inside, hesitant but compelled by the invitation he believed came from her. His confusion was immediate. He looked at her, then at me, then at the crowd, struggling to understand why he had been summoned. She froze for a fraction of a second, long enough for me to see the panic flicker in her eyes before she masked it with a strained smile. The second figure, the one I had seen across the street that night, entered minutes later. He too had believed the invitation was hers. His expression shifted when he realized the gathering was far larger than he expected. He scanned the room, spotted her, and his face twisted with a mix of anger and betrayal. The atmosphere thickened. Conversations faltered. Guests looked between the unfamiliar men and her, sensing the tension without understanding it yet. She tried to recover, tried to usher the men aside, whispering excuses under her breath. But I stepped forward, stopping her with nothing more than a raised hand. Silence settled. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the messages. The screen lit up with words that needed no explanation. One by one, I read them aloud, not in her voice, not with theatrics, but plainly, clinically. Last night was perfect. Same place as before. Can't wait to see you again. Each sentence landed like a hammer blow, undeniable and cold. The men shifted uncomfortably. My parents' expressions darkened. Her colleagues exchanged shocked glances. The room itself seemed to contract, all focus narrowing to her. She tried to speak, but I cut her off with the bank statements. Projected onto the television screen, the numbers told their own story. Transfers, withdrawals, hotel bookings, gifts purchased with money she had siphoned from our accounts. The neat columns of transactions were more damning than any accusation I could craft. Her mask cracked. She stammered explanations, reaching for words that slipped through her fingers. She blamed stress, loneliness, misunderstandings, anything that might soften the weight of what lay exposed. But the evidence was relentless. Every denial collided with a timestamp. Every excuse shattered against a receipt. The first man, the one from the cafe, erupted then. He accused her of lying to him as well, of promising exclusivity, of leading him to believe he was the only one. The second man joined in, his anger sharper, calling her manipulative, revealing details of his own encounters with her. The realization spread through the room like fire. She had not been caught in a single betrayal, but in a lattice of overlapping deceptions. Guests recoiled. My mother's eyes narrowed with fury, my father's jaw tightened. Friends muttered in disbelief. Her colleagues shifted away from her, unwilling to be seen standing close. The men shouted over one another, each trying to reclaim dignity in the wreckage of what she had done to them. She broke then. Tears came, not of remorse, but of desperation. She pleaded with me, reaching out as though I might still offer rescue. But I stood firm, unmoved. Her words carried no weight. They were weapons dulled by overuse, ineffective against the sharpness of truth laid bare. The chaos unfolded in layers. My friend, the one who had kept his silence, admitted openly that he had seen her weeks earlier. His voice shook, guilt spilling into the open. The room turned colder still. It was no longer just her betrayal. It was the humiliation of knowing others had seen, had suspected, while I remained in the dark. By the end of the night, the structure of her life had collapsed. The men stormed out, one after the other, slamming doors behind them. Her colleagues left in awkward silence, their opinions of her forever altered. My parents turned their backs on her pleas, shaking their heads with quiet disgust. Even the walls of the apartment seemed to shrink around her, stripping her of the space where she had once performed so confidently. I left her there, crumpled on the floor, surrounded by the fragments of her lies. No dramatic exit, no parting words. Just the sound of the door closing behind me, final and heavy. The aftermath unfolded quickly. Word spread through her workplace, carried by the colleagues who had witnessed everything. She lost her position within weeks, unable to face the rumors that swirled around her. The money she had hidden was frozen, locked by the investigations that followed my reports to the bank. The men she had deceived cut ties, leaving her stranded without the safety nets she had thought she was weaving. For me, the days that followed were strangely calm. There was no victory, no satisfaction, only the quiet clarity of truth revealed. The life we had shared was over, dismantled in front of those who once believed in her. She was left to face the wreckage alone, and I carried nothing of her into the future except the certainty that the performance was finished. The consequences were permanent. Her reputation, once carefully maintained, was shattered. Her friendships dissolved. The escape route she had built with stolen money vanished. What remained was isolation, the inevitable cost of betrayal brought fully into the light. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.